The night was bitter cold in the Montana wilderness, with snow falling softly through the pine trees. Jack Anderson stood at his cabin window, a cup of hot coffee warming his calloused hands. 5 years of living alone in these woods hadn't made the winters any warmer, but they had made the silence more bearable. The flash came without warning, a streak of blue-white light that split the dark sky. Jack's military instincts kicked in before his mind could process what he was seeing. He was already reaching for his emergency kit when the ground shook with the impact, nearly knocking his coffee cup off the windowsill. "That's no plane," he muttered, grabbing his thick winter coat and medical bag. Old habits died hard. Even after leaving the military, he kept his combat medic's kit fully stocked. His boots crunched in the fresh snow as he headed toward the column of smoke rising above the tree line, about half a mile from his cabin. The sight that greeted him in the small clearing made him stop dead in his tracks. Metal wreckage scattered across the snow, still glowing with heat in places, melting perfect circles in the white ground. The design was like nothing he'd ever seen. Smooth, almost organic curves of a material that seemed to shift colors in the moonlight. "This is impossible," Jack whispered, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. But his training took over, pushing aside the questions crowding his mind. If this was any kind of aircraft, there might be survivors. He circled the wreckage carefully, noting how some pieces seemed to be healing themselves, edges slowly pulling back together. The main body of what he guessed was some kind of scout ship had carved a deep trench in the frozen ground. Following it, he found what remained of the cockpit. That's when he saw her. At first glance, she looked almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face that followed familiar patterns. But her skin had a subtle purple tint that no hypothermia could explain, and what he first took for hair was actually a crown of delicate, iridescent feather-like structures that rippled with color even in her unconscious state. She was badly hurt. Even with alien anatomy, Jack could recognize severe trauma. Energy burns covered her left side, their edges crackling with strange blue electricity. A deep gash ran across her torso, revealing flesh that was definitely not human in its structure, though it bled a dark liquid that stained the snow beneath her. As he knelt beside her, her eyes fluttered open. They were entirely silver, with no visible pupils, but the pain in them was unmistakably human. She tried to speak, a small device at her throat flickering weakly. "Left. Mission failed. No honor in capture." The words came broken, the device obviously damaged. "Don't try to talk," Jack said, already assessing her injuries with practiced efficiency. "I'm a medic. I can help." Her hand shot up with surprising strength, gripping his arm. The translator sparked again. "They coming back. Dark Fleet. Must." She couldn't finish the sentence as consciousness slipped away from her again. Jack heard it then, a high-pitched whine growing in the distance. Looking up, he saw lights in the sky, different from the ship that had crashed. Something told him these weren't rescuers coming to help. Without hesitation, he gathered the alien woman in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, despite being close to human size. The strange metal of her armor felt warm against his hands, almost alive. "Hang on," he told her unconscious form. "I didn't patch up wounded soldiers for 8 years to let someone die in my backyard, human or not." As he carried her back toward his cabin, the lights in the sky grew closer. Snow began falling harder, covering their tracks. Jack smiled grimly. He knew these woods better than anyone, and right now, that might be the only advantage they had. The night swallowed them up just as the first search beams began sweeping the crash site. Whatever was hunting her would have to do better than that to find them in his territory. Jack's cabin had never felt smaller than when he laid the unconscious alien on his bed. Her purple-tinted skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of his oil lamps. The power was out, probably knocked out by whatever had caused her ship to crash. He worked quickly, years of combat medical training guiding his hands. The alien woman's armor was unlike anything he'd seen before, but it responded to touch, loosening when he pressed certain points. It was as if the material itself knew he was trying to help. "Okay," he muttered, "let's see what we're dealing with." The wounds were severe, but not as alien as he'd feared. Her body structure was different. Extra layers of muscle tissue, denser bone structure. But the basics were similar enough. The bleeding had mostly stopped, her body's natural healing already at work. The translator at her throat sparked again, and her silver eyes opened. This time, they focused on him with sharp intelligence. "You?" The device crackled. "Why help?" Jack continued cleaning her wounds, using the most basic medical supplies he had. Sometimes simple solutions were the best. "Because you need it," he said. "I'm Jack. I'm a medic, a healer." She tried to sit up but fell back with a grimace. "Ray," she managed through the failing translator. "Stellar Guard. Scout Unit. Ambushed." "Stay still," Jack said firmly, pressing a clean bandage to her side. "Those energy burns need time to heal. Whatever's hunting you, they'll have trouble finding us in this storm." Ray's expression changed, something like shame crossing her features. "Primitive world shouldn't need help from." The translator died completely. Ray made a frustrated sound, then to Jack's surprise, began forming words carefully in English, as if she'd been studying it. "Your language. Difficult. But I learn from orbit studies." Her accent was strange, but understandable. "My people, we are warriors. To need help from less advanced is shame." Jack couldn't help but laugh as he finished bandaging her wounds. "Less advanced. I'm not the one who crashed." His joke made her silver eyes widen in surprise. "Look, where I served in Afghanistan, I learned something important. It doesn't matter how advanced your weapons are if you don't survive to use them." Outside, the wind howled, covering any sounds of searching aircraft. Jack had already covered the windows and lit a fire in the wood stove. The cabin's walls were thick enough to hide any heat signature. Another reason he'd chosen this place for his self-imposed exile. Ray watched him work with growing curiosity. "You are soldier?" she asked in her careful English. "Was. Combat medic. Retired now." He checked her temperature with the back of his hand. Slightly hot, but he had no idea what was normal for her species. "Your turn. What's the Stellar Guard, and who's trying to kill you?" She was quiet for a long moment, seeming to gather both strength and words. "We are space warriors. Protect trade routes. Dark Fleet. Pirates. Criminals. They attack our patrol. My unit." Pain flickered across her face, not all of it physical. "All dead now." Jack nodded, understanding all too well the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. "Get some rest. We can talk more when you're stronger." As if on cue, Ray's eyes began to close, her body's healing processes demanding sleep. But before she drifted off, she grabbed his wrist again, her grip gentler this time. "Why really help?" she asked. "Could turn me in. Get reward." Jack adjusted the blanket over her, his voice quiet but firm. "Because a long time ago, I swore an oath to help anyone who needed it. Doesn't matter if they're from down the street or across the galaxy." As Ray finally fell asleep, Jack settled into his chair by the wood stove, his old rifle across his lap. Outside, the storm raged on, hiding them from whatever was searching the mountains. He had a feeling the next few days were going to be very interesting indeed. 3 days passed in the isolated cabin while the winter storm raged outside. Ray's condition improved slowly, her alien biology both helping and complicating her recovery. Jack found himself learning more about alien medicine than he'd ever thought possible. "Your bandages," Ray said one morning, her English improving with each passing day. "They are simple, but they work." She sat propped up in bed, examining the clean white gauze covering her energy burns. The wounds were healing, leaving strange, shimmering scars that seemed to shift color in the light. Jack changed her bandages carefully. "Sometimes simple is better. Your body knows how to heal itself. My job is just to help it along." He paused, noticing how the alien tissue was knitting itself back together. "Though I have to say, your healing ability is impressive." Ray touched the translator at her throat, now partially repaired with Jack's help. "Stellar Guard warriors, we are engineered for quick healing. But these burns," she winced. "Dark Fleet weapons are designed to prevent regeneration." As Jack worked, he noticed Ray watching him with increasing curiosity. Her silver eyes tracked his movements, studying his techniques. "You are different," she said finally. "Other humans we watched from orbit, they fear the unknown. But you—" "Fear doesn't help anyone," Jack replied, preparing a herbal paste he found worked well on her burns. "Besides, after what I saw in the war, an alien isn't the strangest thing I've had to patch up." Ray was quiet for a moment. "You speak of war, but avoid speaking of it. Like there is pain there." Jack's hands stilled briefly. "Lost my whole team. Bad intel, bad situation. I got them to the evacuation point, but—" he focused on applying the paste. "Couldn't save them in the end." "So you hide here," Ray said, but there was no judgment in her voice. "Like I tried to hide my shame at being rescued by—" She paused. "I was wrong. About humans being primitive." A comfortable silence fell between them as Jack finished his work. Outside, the snow had finally stopped, leaving the world eerily quiet. Ray tried to stand, her legs shaky but stronger than the day before. "Careful," Jack warned, but stayed back, letting her test her strength. "In Stellar Guard," Ray said, taking careful steps, "showing weakness is forbidden. Needing help is—" She searched for the word. "Dishonor." Jack steadied her when she stumbled. "Sounds lonely." "Yes." Ray's admission seemed to surprise even her. "Perhaps that is why we lose so often to Dark Fleet. They work together, while we—" She straightened up, fighting against the pain. "We prize individual strength too much." Jack helped her back to the bed. "There's strength in knowing when to accept help. Took me years to learn that. Still learning, really." Ray's silver eyes met his. "Your medicine is different. You talk to patient. Try to understand. Our healers." She shook her head. "They fix body, ignore spirit. Can't heal one without the other," Jack said, checking her temperature again. It was closer to normal now, or what he'd figured out was normal for her species. Body and spirit are connected. Any good medic knows that. Ray touched one of her healing wounds thoughtfully. "Perhaps this is why Dark Fleet attacked us. We become rigid, unchanging, while they adapt, learn new ways." "Change is hard," Jack said, starting to clean up his medical supplies. "But sometimes it takes getting knocked down to learn how to stand up differently." A sudden noise outside made them both freeze. Ray's feather-like crown rippled with alert colors, while Jack moved silently to the window. Through a gap in the covered windows, they could see fresh tracks in the snow, tracks that weren't human, and weren't made by any animal Jack knew. "They found us," Ray whispered, her voice tense but steady. "Dark Fleet hunters." Jack checked his rifle, then began gathering essential supplies. "Well," he said with a grim smile, "guess it's time to show them how primitive humans fight." The tracks in the snow led in a circle around the cabin. Jack counted at least 3 different patterns, 3 hunters, moving with inhuman precision. Through the gaps in the covered windows, he could see strange lights flickering between the trees. "They're testing us," Ray said, her voice low. She stood beside him, still favoring her injured side but ready to fight. Dark Fleet hunters always study their prey first. Jack handed her his spare hunting knife. "Good thing we're not prey." He checked his rifle again, though he doubted regular bullets would do much against advanced alien armor. "Tell me about these hunters." 3, maybe 4 warriors, Ray explained, her feather crown shifting to darker colors. "They wear stealth suits, can bend light around them, almost invisible." She gripped the knife with familiar ease. "But in snow, they leave tracks," Jack finished, already forming a plan. "Any weak points in their armor?" "Joints." neck seals, power units on their backs. Ray's silver eyes narrowed. But they are fast, strong, and their weapons. A beam of energy sliced through one of the cabin's windows, leaving a smoking hole in the wall. Jack pulled Ray down as more beams cut through the air above them. "They're done studying," Jack muttered. "Back door. Now." They crawled through the cabin as more energy beams pierced the walls. Jack grabbed his emergency pack, medical supplies, ammunition, and survival gear. Ray moved beside him, her warrior's training evident despite her injuries. "Your cabin," she said. "They will destroy it." "Just a building," Jack replied, though his heart ached at the thought. "Better it than us." They slipped out the back door just as the front of the cabin erupted in blue flames. The winter air hit them like a punch. But Jack was grateful for the snow now. In the pre-dawn light, he could see the hunters' tracks clearly. A shimmer in the air was their only warning. Jack shoved Ray aside as an energy blade sliced through the space where they'd been standing. The hunter materialized, a tall figure in sleek black armor, its helmet a smooth, featureless oval. Jack fired 3 quick shots. The bullets sparked off the armor, but the hunter staggered back, surprised by the primitive weapon's force. Ray used the distraction to throw her knife, finding a gap in the armor's neck seal. Dark fluid sprayed as the hunter fell. 2 more, Ray warned, retrieving her knife. "They'll be more careful now." Jack pointed to the dense forest. "That's counting on it. Follow me." They ran through the trees, Jack leading them through paths he knew by heart. Behind them, energy beams lit up the forest, but Jack had chosen their route carefully. The thick pines absorbed or scattered the shots. "Humans," Ray said between breaths, "you know your world's advantages." "We've had to," Jack replied. "Not being the strongest means learning to be the smartest." They reached a small clearing. Jack held up his hand, and they stopped at its edge. The snow here was deeper, untouched. "What are you?" Ray began, but Jack pressed a finger to his lips. The shimmer in the air appeared again, both remaining hunters, moving into the clearing. Their stealth suits rippled, trying to match the white snow and gray morning sky. Jack smiled grimly. "Remember how I said sometimes simple is better?" He fired a single shot, not at the hunters, but at a snow-laden branch above them. The heavy snow crashed down, outlining their invisible forms perfectly. Before they could move, Jack fired again, hitting the exposed power units on their backs. The stealth suits failed, leaving the hunters visible and vulnerable. Ray moved with startling speed, her knife finding weak points in their armor with deadly precision. In less than a minute, it was over. 3 Dark Fleet hunters lay dead in the snow, defeated by what they had dismissed as primitive tactics. "Your world," Ray said, looking at Jack with new respect. "It has taught you well." "Sometimes," Jack replied, checking the hunters' bodies for useful supplies. "The best tech is no tech at all." A distant rumbling made them both look up. Through the breaking dawn, they could see more lights in the sky. "That's not the end of them, is it?" Jack asked. Ray shook her head. "Dark Fleet never sends just one team." Jack and Ray took shelter in an old hunting cabin 3 miles from the burning remains of Jack's home. The small wooden structure was well hidden in a dense grove of pine trees, one of several backup locations Jack had prepared over the years. Old habits die hard, and now those habits were keeping them alive. "Your preparation," Ray said, examining the stored supplies. "It is like stellar guard forward planning." She picked up one of the emergency radio units, but much more personal. Jack was checking the hunters' equipment they'd salvaged. The alien weapons were damaged from his shots to their powered units, but the armor still held secrets. When you live alone in the wilderness, you learn to plan ahead. Ray sat beside him, her silver eyes studying the Dark Fleet armor. "These power cores," she said, pointing to the damaged units, "they can be adapted. Made into, what is your word, traps. Like improvised explosives." Jack raised an eyebrow. Thought your people considered that kind of fighting beneath them. I am learning, Ray replied, her feather crown rippling with determination. That survival is more important than pride. She touched her healing wounds. You taught me that. Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. All right, show me how these power cores work. And I'll show you some tricks I learned about setting ambushes. They spent the next few hours preparing. Ray explained the weaknesses in Dark Fleet technology, their reliance on energy shields, their sensor blind spots, their communication frequencies. Jack shared his knowledge of guerrilla warfare, teaching her how to use the landscape as a weapon. Your mountains, Ray said, looking out the cabin's window at the snow-covered peaks. They are like natural fortresses. Dark Fleet ships, they struggle in such conditions. That's why I chose this place, Jack replied, laying out a rough map he'd drawn. Lots of caves, narrow valleys, dense forest. Perfect for disappearing. Ray studied the map intently. More hunters will come. A full strike team. Maybe two. Her expression was grim. They cannot allow news of their defeat to spread. Bad for their reputation. How many in a strike team? 10 warriors, each stronger than the 3 we killed. Ray's hand went to her side, where her wounds were still healing. They will be angry now. Less careful. Jack smiled. Angry enemies make mistakes. We can use that. He pointed to several spots on the map. These ridges here, they create natural choke points, if we place those power core traps right. And here, Ray added, catching on quickly. This valley. Sound echoes strangely in your atmosphere. Their sonic sensors will be confused. They work together, combining their knowledge. Jack taught Ray about weather patterns in the mountains, how storms could appear suddenly and disorient anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. Ray showed him how Dark Fleet armor had poor thermal regulation, a weakness in the extreme cold. It's strange, Ray said as they finished their preparations. In Stellar Guard, we train alone, fight alone. But this, she gestured at their combined work. This feels stronger, Jack finished. There's an old saying here, 2 heads are better than 1. A faint rumbling made them both look up. Through the cabin's window, they could see dark shapes moving through the clouds. Dark Fleet dropships, searching the mountains. They're earlier than expected, Ray said, but her voice was steady. Jack checked his rifle and the makeshift explosives they'd created from the alien power cores. Good. Less time to worry. He looked at Ray, ready to show them what happens when primitive tactics meet advanced technology. Ray picked up one of the modified alien weapons they'd repaired. Her feather crown shimmered with colors that Jack had learned meant determination and trust. Ready, she said. And Jack, thank you for showing me a different kind of strength. The rumbling grew closer. Somewhere in the mountains, the first Dark Fleet strike team was landing. The real battle was about to begin. The first explosion lit up the pre-dawn sky like artificial lightning. From their position high in the mountains, Jack and Ray watched as the Dark Fleet strike team walked right into their trap. The modified power core detonated, its energy pulse shorting out the hunters' stealth systems. First team is blind, Ray whispered, her silver eyes tracking the confused enemy movements below. Their backup systems will take 3 minutes to restart. Jack shouldered his rifle, now modified with parts from the dead hunter's weapons. Then let's not waste time. He fired 3 quick shots, each one finding gaps in the hunter's disabled armor. 2 went down immediately. The remaining hunters scattered, but they moved exactly as Ray had predicted, straight into the narrow valley where sound played tricks in the thin mountain air. Their sonic sensors, meant to detect any movement, bounced signals off the rock walls in a confused jumble. Your mountains fight with us, Ray said with satisfaction. She triggered another trap, this one releasing an avalanche of snow onto the disoriented hunters. Like living allies. The Dark Fleet soldiers were skilled, though. Even trapped and confused, they fought back with devastating energy weapons. the air filled with blue-white beams that melted snow into instant steam. "Second team incoming," Jack warned, spotting more dropships descending through the clouds. Time for Phase 2. They moved quickly through the trees, using paths Jack had marked. The hunters tried to follow but stumbled in the deep snow. Their advanced armor, designed for space combat, worked against them in the harsh mountain environment. "They're splitting up," Ray observed as they reached their next position. "Trying to surround us." Jack grinned. Big mistake. He pressed the detonator they'd rigged from salvaged alien tech. Multiple explosions rang out across the mountainside. Each blast was small, but they triggered larger avalanches. The carefully placed charges, combined with Ray's knowledge of Dark Fleet shield frequencies, created a devastating combination. The second strike team emerged from their dropships just in time to see half their comrades buried in snow and rock. They charged forward in rage, exactly as Ray had predicted. "Your trap worked," she said to Jack, genuine admiration in her voice. Their anger blinds them to obvious strategy. The battle shifted into close combat as hunters broke through their defenses. Ray moved with fluid grace despite her healing wounds, her knife finding weak points in enemy armor. Jack fought with the practiced efficiency of a combat veteran, using the terrain to nullify the hunter's technological advantages. A massive hunter, clearly the strike team leader, charged at them through the chaos. His armor crackled with energy as he shrugged off their shots. "Command unit armor," Ray said tersely. "Too strong for our weapons." Jack watched the hunter's movement for a moment. Maybe, but not too strong for nature. He fired at the snowbank above the charging leader. The hunter looked up too late. Tons of snow crashed down, and even his enhanced armor couldn't prevent him from sliding toward the cliff edge. His energy shield sparked and failed in the extreme cold, just as Ray had said it would. The remaining hunters, seeing their leader fall, pressed their attack with desperate fury. But fury was no match for careful planning. One by one, they fell to traps, avalanches, and precisely placed shots. As the sun finally rose over the mountains, the battlefield grew quiet. Steam rose from melted snow where energy weapons had struck. Dark Fleet hunters lay scattered across the mountainside, defeated by the very primitive conditions they had dismissed. Ray stood in the morning light, her feather crown shimmering with colors of victory and awe. 20 elite hunters, she said, defeated by 2 warriors and a mountain. Jack checked their remaining ammunition and supplies. "Not over yet," he warned. "That was just the first wave. They'll send more." Ray nodded, but she was smiling. "Let them come. We have shown that strength is not just about advanced weapons." A distant alarm sound caught their attention. Ray's expression changed to one of surprise and hope. "That signal," she said. "It's Stellar Guard. They're finally coming." Jack looked at the battlefield around them. "Think they'll get here before the next Dark Fleet wave?" "We should hope not," Ray replied with a warrior's grin. "I want them to see how humans fight." The Stellar Guard ships descended from the clouds like silver arrows, their arrival heralded by a deep humming that made the mountain snow vibrate. The remaining Dark Fleet forces scattered at their approach, their dropships fleeing into the upper atmosphere. Jack watched the massive vessels hover over the battlefield, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the rugged mountain landscape. Beside him, Ray stood tall despite her exhaustion, her feather crown glowing with proud colors. "Your people have good timing," Jack said, lowering his modified rifle. "They came because of this," Ray replied, holding up a small device she'd taken from a fallen Dark Fleet commander. Their battle recordings. Proof of what happened here. Her silver eyes met his. Proof of what humans can do. The first Stellar Guard shuttle landed in a cleared area, its landing gear crunching in the blood-stained snow. Warriors in gleaming armor emerged, their own feather crowns marking them as Ray's superior officers. Their expressions showed clear shock at the battlefield before them. Elite Dark Fleet hunters defeated by avalanches, improvised traps, and precise shooting. "Lieutenant Ray," the lead officer addressed her in their language, then switched to careful English. Your distress signal indicated you were stranded, not that you had engaged two Dark Fleet strike teams. Engaged and defeated, Commander, Ray corrected proudly. With human help. She gestured to Jack. This is Jack Anderson. He saved my life, healed my wounds, and taught me new ways of fighting. The commander studied Jack with intensely bright silver eyes. A human did this. He surveyed the battlefield again. Our reports marked Earth as a developing world. Primitive. Primitive doesn't mean weak, Jack said calmly. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. Ray stepped forward. Commander, I request permission to make a formal declaration. When the officer nodded, she continued, I claim Earth as a protected world under the Stellar Guard Code. Not because they need our protection, but because they have earned our respect. The commander's feather crown shifted through surprised colors. That is unprecedented. A primitive world, given protected status. Look around you. Ray gestured at the fallen Dark Fleet hunters. Their advanced technology meant nothing against human ingenuity and courage. We have much to learn from them. Jack watched the exchange quietly, noting how the other Stellar Guard warriors were examining the battlefield, studying the simple but effective traps with growing respect. The commander was silent for a long moment before speaking. Very well. The declaration is recorded. He turned to Jack. Your world will be marked as under Stellar Guard protection. No hostile forces may approach Earth without consequences. Appreciate that, Jack replied with a slight smile. Though from what I've seen, we can handle ourselves pretty well. Ray touched the healing wounds on her side. Jack, the Stellar Guard owes you a debt. Name your reward. Jack looked at his burned-out cabin in the distance, then at the mountains that had helped them win this battle. Just rebuild my cabin. This is my home. Though, he paused. Maybe add some better insulation this time. The commander actually laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. It shall be done. And more. He turned to Ray. Lieutenant, after your injuries are properly treated, you will return to Earth as our first official ambassador. We have much to learn about human combat tactics. Ray's feather crown glowed with joy. And I have the perfect teacher in mind. She looked at Jack. If he's willing. Jack surveyed the battlefield one last time. The evidence of how human resourcefulness and alien technology had worked together to achieve the impossible. Well, he said with a growing smile, I suppose I could use some company up here. Gets pretty quiet in the mountains. As the Stellar Guard began cleaning up the battlefield, Ray and Jack watched the sun rise fully over the peaks. It was a new day, not just for them, but for both their peoples. Sometimes, Jack reflected, the best healing comes from helping others. And sometimes the strongest allies are found in the most unexpected places.